Well, welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Pentecast podcast. My name is Andrew Bella. Alongside me is my good friend, Ryan Sellers. What's up, Ryan?
Just another day, my friend.
Well, that is exactly right. Another Monday morning.
Yes, sir.
Another day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. And excited for this episode. Excited for everything that's been going on. As you can tell, I'm wearing my Harley Davidson hat. I've been in the saddle, folks.
And in the rain.
Man, I've experienced thunderstorms, lightning, wind, rain, in which no man has ever seen other than Noah himself. Man, Danny Wells, my wife's uncle, some of you who know them, he invited me to ride Harleys down to Daytona and wanted to trade in his bike down there at Bruce Rossmeyer's Harley Davidson. It's supposedly the biggest Harley store in the world. And so we left about 4:30, 4:45 or what have you, and went down to Daytona. Weather was gorgeous, man, flying down I-95. You know what? If you want a closer personal relationship with God, just get on a motorcycle.
And go 85 miles an hour.
Yeah. Amy's like, you got to be careful because people aren't paying attention. And I understand they're dangerous, but I just love riding a motorcycle. I always have. And I think I pay attention enough for all of us. And so I'm driving like a grandpa on the fast lane in the interstate. Now, Amy's uncle, on the other hand, he's already lived his life, and he was booking it.
Fearless.
Yeah. On the way back, we get up to Jacksonville, and, man, we hit rain like I have never seen it. Me and Danny were the only ones driving on the interstate. Every car had pulled off.
Really?
He and I are in the middle lane, ducked down, trying to look through the windshield and just booking it as fast as we could to get out of the rainstorm.
Gracious.
We ended up having to pull over at the gas station to wait out the rain. It kind of eased off a little bit, and I was like, oh, man, we're in the clear. The second we left the gas station, it turned right back on. And so I turned my boots over when I got to the house, and just rainwater just come right out.
Word.
However, it was worth the trip, Ryan.
Yeah.
I hope everybody's looking here. I have delivered Ryan Sellers. Hold these up with pride. I've delivered Ryan Sellers his famous beaver nuggets, folks, from Buc-ee's. So enjoy. We're gonna be chewing on some of those while we have our topic of discussion tonight. A recap of what we were talking about the last episode was talking Thomas. Mm-hmm. We looked at him in a different light as far as, how can I relate to Thomas? Well, I'm full of questions all the time, and I like to know the facts as far as, will this benefit me? Yeah. You know what I mean?
You don't take things at face value, which is not a bad thing.
No, it's not. And so we learned a lot about Thomas. We learned that maybe his doubt was actually a good thing rather than a bad thing, the way that we hear it preached so often, that he was the doubter. And so we also talked about Judas, the Judas steer. And so keeping the topic along the lines of disciples, today we were going to name this episode Pipe Down, Peter.
Yeah.
Pipe Down, Peter, because Peter is the disciple. I want to ask the listeners this question and drop your answer in the comments or email it to me at andrew@pentecastpodcast.com. Was Peter the greatest failure that Jesus ever called, or was he the greatest leader that Jesus ever called?
Or was he the most human?
The most human? What about Peter's life? I know you said that he was the disciple that you related to more than anybody. Number one, why, and what scripture necessarily speaks to you? Man, that sounds just like me.
Well, for one, the failure part I can definitely relate to. But I think the determination to get up and brush himself off every single time and ultimately live out his entire life and be crucified upside down because he wasn't worthy to be crucified like Christ. He lived his entire life after Jesus left. He finished his course, finished his race well. And that is something that I hope I can do.
Yeah. One thing that cannot be said about Peter is he was a quitter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times the humiliation that he went through.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about when he was crucified upside down to the first time that he met Jesus, there was a lot of in between.
Mm-hmm.
And
many stumbles, many failures.
many times.
Yeah.
And the amount of humiliation that went into that, no normal human being would ever even attempt again. If I failed that many times at something, I don't think that I'm going to try it again, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a testimony to Peter and his relentlessness. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. So the pipe down Peter part is kind of where I want to go with this as far as learning who he was.
Yeah.
Peter, was he a total failure? Well, he was human. I guess all of us, basically would fall into that category at least one time in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that sticks out to me about Peter, while I was studying the life of Peter, one of my favorite verses that I can quote is found in Matthew, when Jesus enters the coast of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I am?" And some of the disciples stood up and said, "Thou art." Some say that thou art Elias. Some say that thou art Jeremiah. Some say you're a prophet of old. And then so Jesus asked this question. He said, "But who do you say that I am?" Mm-hmm. And Peter stood up and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus gave this amazing word to Peter that we hold dear to our hearts as the church of the living God today, when he says, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed this unto thee, but my Father in heaven. And I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it." What was all that? That was the first man
to acknowledge Christ for who he was.
To acknowledge Christ as the Savior of the world.
Yeah.
God's only begotten Son.
And we look back, 2,000 plus years later, and we say, well, yeah, that happened. But you have to think about these men. How old was Peter when he became a disciple?
I don't know.
40?
Middle-aged, I would say.
Yeah, 40 plus. He's a grown man. They're grown men. They're working. They're fishing every day. Here comes this total stranger. Mm-hmm. Follow me.
I'll make you fishers of men.
Yeah. Put down your nets and follow me.
Yep.
And they did it.
Leave your job.
Yeah, leave your job. Leave whatever element of stability you have. Follow this stranger.
Yeah. This wasn't a Saturday fishing trip with his family.
No.
He was fishing to earn a living to raise his family.
Exactly.
So you have to put it in perspective. You're telling me to walk away from everything. He was willing to do that. Mm-hmm. That showed his eagerness to serve.
Yeah.
There's so many great attributes about Peter that we can relate to. That's why when you say that you relate to Peter, mm-hmm. it's because you see the good in him, but also you see the time after time that he mm-hmm. failed. And if you're human,
it gives me hope.
It gives me hope too, Ryan. It really does. It gives me hope. So not only does Peter have this awesome honor of being the first man to proclaim that Christ is who he is.
He was the first to denounce him.
He's the very first man out of the group to say, "I never knew him.
Yeah.
I don't know who you're talking about." And not only...
Just hours after Jesus himself said, "You're going to do this."
Yep.
No, I'm not going to do it. No, I'll never do that.
No, you're right. I'll never do this, Lord. I'll never be that guy. Uh-huh. And Ryan, he was close enough for Jesus to lock eyes on him when he did it.
Yeah.
And the Bible even says that he cursed. This isn't the Peter Jesus.
No.
I mean, he knew all along, but this isn't the Peter that showed up when Jesus was around.
Yeah.
I'm with you to the end, Lord. Mm-hmm. But Jesus knew this is what's going to happen when you're under pressure. Peter mm-hmm. cracked under pressure over and over and over again. I have found myself to do the same thing without the help of God. I crack under pressure. I want to say this about Peter. He has these amazing ideas. The most of the time in Peter's ministry in his life, while he's with the Lord, he's a cloud without rain. Mm-hmm. He makes these big thundering statements, but there's no validity to it because he's so volatile. He's so volatile. However, take the good and throw out the cob, he's also the same one that is willing to try.
Yeah.
He's willing to give it a try. Jesus asked him to come out of the boat. He's the first one that'll do it.
Yeah. You jump on him because he sank, but he's the only one that got out of the boat.
Mm-hmm. He's the only one that tried.
Yeah.
He's the only one that tried. So I thought that was neat. He's the first disciple, first man to proclaim that Jesus is Lord. And he's also the first man to deny that he ever knew him or had a relationship with him. That's tough.
That's both poles.
I mean, you don't go to any other spectrum on that. I felt like I was contradicting myself whenever I was studying Peter and then going back and listening to our episode about Thomas, because I was saying that Thomas was the only one that was willing to ask a question. There's only one name mentioned more than Peter's in the New Testament: Jesus. Peter's name is mentioned second to Jesus. That's how many times he was mentioned in the Bible. That means he was the most mentioned disciple out of any of them. You want to know why? Because he always talked.
Yeah.
Always talked.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of reiterate, there's two different types of people. Thomas is the one that asks questions for his own sake.
That's right.
Like, I need to know this for my comfort.
Yeah.
Peter, on the other hand, just wanted to know, but he was always on to the next thing.
That's
the
right.
next thing. He
skipped the details.
Exactly.
The first thing I think about when I think about Peter is probably his failures. Probably.
Which one in particular?
From a child, you hear about him stepping out of the boat, but the number one thing is him denying Christ.
Yeah, that was the ultimate humiliating factor of his life.
Yeah.
For sure. When I think about Peter, and I jotted this down, I think of someone who is persistent and so eager to do something that he forgets the details. I think of someone who is bold as a lion and as sloppy as a dirty mop. I see someone who is clearly the leader of the disciples, second to Jesus. If you look at a leader, they're outspoken.
Yeah.
Usually they'll throw their neck out first.
Yeah.
Before anything, they'll make a statement and they'll say things. A leader that is bold, they'll do whatever they have to do to get their point across because they're very passionate about what they do. That's what I see in a leader. What about you? What do you see in Peter when you think about him, other than his faults and failures? The man himself, what takeaways do you have of his character?
Well, I look at his devotion to Christ, whether he denied him or not. He's totally devoted to him as much as he can be.
Yeah.
He leads the other disciples. He's the oldest, so he's the old fat gray-headed guy leading them. From every depiction you see.
Yeah.
But he is action first, questions later, or no questions at all.
Yeah,
just
it
action.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, and Jesus is always going behind him and saying, "No,
slow
Peter,
down,
you should have
pipe
done
down.
this. Don't cut his ear off. Come on, let me fix that.
This isn't the revolution that I wanted you to start."
Yeah,
it's like we talked about. Pipe down, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Be quiet and listen.
Yeah,
for a chance.
Exactly.
They're on the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus is letting him in. And number one, somebody that annoys me as much as Peter probably annoyed Jesus, I would have never let him up there. But Jesus was like, number one, I'm going to keep him around because the first message he preaches after Pentecost, 3,000 souls are going to be added to the church. Jesus sees way down the road, know? And so he's looking at Peter and he's like, hey, come with me to the Mount of Transfiguration. I think it was Peter, James, and John, I think. I'll look it up for all you Bible scholars. I don't have a Bible in front of me. And I don't want to disappoint the little girl at Savannah. But I think that it was Peter, James, and John, if I'm not mistaken. I do know Peter and John were up there. And they're seeing this amazing thing happen. And the first person to pipe up is Peter.
Sure.
Oh, let's build tabernacles for Moses and Isaiah, and let's build one for Christ, and God, through the thundering cloud says, "This is my son, hear ye him." Basically what God told Peter was,
Shh. Hush
your mouth. Listen. Just pay attention, And I don't want to say that I only can relate to one disciple, because after even Judas I can relate to.
Sure.
Judas, let me tell you how I relate to him. He got upset over somebody who was pouring their heart out to God because they were wasting money. I've gotten upset over petty junk too.
Yeah.
Okay? I've betrayed the Lord before with my private time that he didn't deserve to be betrayed, I've squandered opportunity. With Thomas, I've doubted. I've had questions. But with Peter, I'm all over the map as well.
Yeah.
At 1 minute, I want to do something amazing for God, and then I forget, wait a minute, there's a bunch of in-between stuff that you didn't figure out. Slow down. And then I get discouraged. I get humiliated, and then it's hard to get back up.
One thing about Peter and most all of the disciples that I relate to or that I respect is that while Christ is walking side by side with them, they're a hot mess. They're messing up all the time. Yeah. And then after he's gone and Pentecost happens, they are like straight as an arrow, and they go all the way to the grave for him without faltering.
Yep.
And that's
a testimony to Christ, the way he can teach.
Yeah.
Like we said, 2.5 years I've got.
And you think about every time after he left, that's what he meant. All these light bulb moments, that's what he meant. That's what he was saying when he said such and such. I just didn't get it. When he was right in my face, I didn't get it. And now, every time, every light bulb that goes off, I can just see more fuel, more determination. They go all the way to the grave for him.
Yep, you're right. And with Peter and his life, man, the thing that really gets me, especially like thinking about young people, you and I are Sunday school teachers together, and we have young people every Sunday morning that we are trying our best to let them know we're not perfect, but we serve a perfect God who is continually working on us, continually helping us. And one thing that we can learn from Peter is that it's not making 100% each and every time. People cringe when you say that you're not perfect. They're like, "Oh, don't give the devil credit."
I know.
It's not that we're giving the devil credit, but we're not
we're
lying
not
anymore.
To be something that
exactly. We're not going to lie.
I think about what you said in Sunday school last time we were together. If your definition of Christ is that he's waiting on me to mess up, and that when I do, I'm done.
Yeah.
If that's your definition or what you think of God and the personal relationship that you're supposed to have, you don't know him.
You don't know him.
And I think Peter's life is a perfect testament to that.
So true.
And time after time, just as we've said here, time after time, he faltered, he failed, he spoke when he should have listened, he acted when he should have just stood still. Time after time after time, Christ himself nurtured him.
Yep.
Said, "Slow down, Peter.
Slow down.
Listen.
Never gave up on him.
Put your sword down. Just listen. This is the will of God."
How many times does he do that to us?
I know
daily?
Yeah.
Where I am literally ready to cut an ear off.
Yeah.
Not a soldier, but maybe a
co-worker.
or whoever, a citizen.
Yeah.
And in Christ, the Spirit of God will stop me and say, "Andrew, there's a better way." And sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. It's not like I'm like, and then I have this amazing revelation. There's sometimes that I do make the wrong decision, that it's after the fact, like Peter, that Christ shows himself real to me and said, "You know what, if we would have done it this way, we could have avoided this. You're right, Lord. Yeah. You're right." The greatest thing, in my opinion, about Peter is his finish.
I totally agree.
All in between, and I've heard, the reason why Peter failed so much is because he wasn't saved, because Christ's sacrifice hadn't been made. But once Christ ascended and he was saved, then he didn't mess up anymore. I don't really buy that, because you don't hear anything bad about all the disciples. You don't hear much bad about Andrew, who is the next one we're going to talk about, and thank you for that. You don't hear, I'm sure he was there because Peter was the leader of the disciples.
Sure.
I mean, it's evident. You read the Bible. He was the one that was calling the shots under Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so everybody kind of fit in that category. If they followed Peter, they all got in trouble, guilty by association. But you don't hear a bunch of negative things on Andrew, for example, or some of the other ones. But Peter is willing to stick his neck out. He's willing to get offended. Yeah. He's willing to get hurt. Peter, in my opinion, was the perfect one that Christ could mold, because no matter how hard Christ got onto him, and he was pretty brutal to him, he went from Simon to Peter to Satan, changed his name. Then he says, I'll never let you die. Oh, and Christ just had a quick rebuke. Mm-hmm. Get behind me, Satan. But Peter, instead of getting offended at Christ, he stood with him.
Okay.
I'm sorry. He's the perfect example of what young people need to hear nowadays. A preacher preaches a message, and let's bring it into 2021 here. Yeah. A preacher preaches a message, and you get offended because he's stepping on your toes. Mm-hmm. But Peter, I'll be honest with you, I don't like being humiliated. Mm-mm. I don't like being embarrassed. Mm-mm. And despite what people think, I like to have a good time, but I don't like being the brunt of all the jokes. Mm-hmm. Nobody does. I don't care who you are. And Peter, of all the times that he was openly rebuked, shamed, embarrassment after embarrassment, then Christ comes back looking for Peter. He hears his voice and he knows it's Jesus. He's naked by a fire, not doing what he was supposed to do. Embarrassed again. He had more excuse, I guess, to give up, quit, whatever you want to say, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. He kept on letting the Lord mold him into the man that he became, and thank the Lord for it, because his testimony after Pentecost made the church explode. Yeah. So he was a vital person in the expansion of Christianity today. And so in 2021, it's so easy to sit on our pews and get offended by the same spirit that was speaking to Peter.
From Christ himself.
From Christ himself.
And that's what's happening to us when the pastor gets on our toes. He's already been in tune with Christ himself, and then we get offended when he gets on our toes, when you need to say, thank you, Lord, for drawing my attention to my failure. Exactly.
So there's so many things that we can take from Peter's life. His failures, and we can take the negative things that happen in his life and turn it to positive energy for ours.
Absolutely.
I don't want to make the same mistakes Peter did, but also I want to thank Peter for trying. Yeah. And thank him for the times that he was like a sloppy, dirty mop, and the times that he showed boldness and spoke up and was that leader, And so to speak to the leaders that may be even listening, if you've messed up, you've spoken out of turn, you've done things, even as a pastor, when I was there pastoring at the church that I didn't do everything perfect, and there's things that I learned. Yeah. Matter of fact, one thing that was so humbling is whenever Brother Lindell and Sister Cindy Birdsong were on our podcast, if you hear them, they didn't get everything right. No. Even in their ministry, they said, this is where we messed up. This is where we didn't use wisdom. Mm-hmm. And so this notion that the young people, in anybody alike in a church, you have to be perfect. You've got to, and we're selling a different gospel. I'm sorry, that might come across a little harsh, but we're selling a falsehood if we think that these people that are in our churches right now, that the only way you're going to be successful is if you don't mess up. What we're telling them is this, Ryan: the only way you're going to be successful is if you don't get caught. Yep. That's what we're telling them. But Jesus openly rebuked Peter. He told him what he didn't want to hear, but he told him every time what he needed to hear. Mm-hmm. And Peter benefited from that greatly. Yeah. He really did. I've enjoyed it.
Likewise, sir.
I was really excited to do an episode on Peter. Yeah. Because breaking him down, he's an average old guy.
Yeah, he's human.
He's human.
And we, you and I, and us as a church should appreciate humanity.
You got that right.
And as we said on the episode, Don't be covered up with a facade. You ain't got to put all your failures on the front pew. You don't have to scream them from the rooftop. But we're all human.
You got that right. Next time you're in a service and God's telling you to get out of the boat, just dive in head first. If you start sinking, reach out for help. That's what Peter did. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Pentecast podcast.
Over and under.